Hi, welcome to the Brief Book Reviews channel, otherwise known as An Old Guy Reviews the Book that he's read this week. So what's the old guy read this week? Well, the book I've read this week is this one. It's called One of Us is Dead by author Peter James. That was published as a hardback here in the United Kingdom on the 24th of September 2024 by Macmillan. And it's another story of Brighton's busiest Detective Superintendent Roy Grace. This is Grace 20, it's the 20th Roy Grace adventure. I've reviewed some of the previous ones, Stop Them Dead and Picture You Dead, here on the channel. So that was 19 and 18. Have a look if you're interested. There's also a review of They Thought I Was Dead, which is Sandy's story, Roy Grace's first wife, but technically not a Roy Grace book. I digress. Back to the plot. So what's this one all about, I hear you say? Well, kicks off with a guy called James Taylor. He's attending a funeral. He's a bit late. He's stood at the back of the church. And he's attending the funeral of a former school friend called Barney Wallace. Now, at school, James, Barney, and another guy called Rufus Rourke, were best mates. They were known as the Three Musketeers, one for all and all for one. They were best mates at school, and they said, you know, when they leave school and move on into normal life, they'll still keep in touch. Well, life got in the way. They didn't really keep in touch, but James wanted to attend Barney's funeral. Barney was a bit of a dreamer, but he felt, I'm going to go and pay my last respects. So James is at the back of the church, and 6 rows in front of him, he thinks he recognises somebody. There's a guy that's dressed up in a fairly big coat, wearing a baseball cap and a scarf around him, so you can't really see his face, but he thinks, that's Rufus, their third mate. And he really can't get it out of his head. And then he sees this guy make a slight move with his head. He inclines it to the left a bit, which was a habit that Rufus had. And he thinks, how can this be? The reason he's thinking that is that 2 years ago, Rufus Rourke died. He fell off a luxury yacht in the Caribbean in shark-infested waters. Body never found. And James delivered the eulogy at Rufus's funeral. So how could this possibly be Rufus? So James, who's former EasyJet pilot, now working as a private pilot for a millionaire, got a bit of time on his hands and thinks, I'm going to have a look at this because I can't get it out of the back of my head because for all intents and purposes, that's Rufus, and Rufus is a dead man. On the other side of town, in Brighton, Roy Grace, Detective Superintendent Roy Grace, has sat with his sidekick, Detective Inspector Glenn Branson, and he's saying, Glenn, look at this. There's a 39-year-old guy that's died because he's ate a death cap mushroom. He was preparing a meal for some people, and he's died all of a sudden. And that, of course, is Barney. So, meanwhile, a couple of days later at a golf course, a lady who's on the golf course picks a mushroom, eats it, and she's seriously ill, and it's a death cap mushroom. And he said, what's going on? We haven't had any deaths in Brighton for 20 years of people eating death cap mushrooms. And granted, apparently they look the same as normal mushrooms. But all of a sudden, we've got 2 in a fortnight. What's going on? And so the tale unfolds. And we find that Grace and his team are finding more and more murders. And there is more and more clues and facts that point to this is being carried out by a dead man. And there's a strapline in the book that says, how dangerous can a dead man be? Well, the answer to that is very dangerous. There are, all of a sudden, murders are occurring across Brighton that initially look like accidents, but have been engineered to look like accidents. And there are some very, very clever murders that have been committed by the mystery man that looks more and more like this guy that's supposed to be dead, Rufus. So it's a rattling good story. Lots of very intricate and cleverly designed murders by this guy who's operating on the dark web, taking payments as a killer via Bitcoin, and basically almost untraceable. So a great yarn. And what I liked about the book is that there's a lot of police procedural in this, and the Peter James books featuring Roy Grace, are heavy on that. So you see a lot of the Grace and his team using ANPR, CCTV, gait analysis, facial recognition software. But When it comes down to it, one of the Grace regulars, D.S. Norman Potting, says to one of his younger colleagues, yeah, all these tools are very, very good and they're very helpful, but there's nothing that quite beats old-fashioned detective work, knocking on doors, asking questions. And it's a great combination of those two things. As a little side plot, we also see a brief appearance by Grace's nemesis, his former boss, his former ACC boss, and I won't divulge what happens there because that will spoil the book for people. So all in all, another good read. I guess when there's a long series, some books tend to be better than others by very nature, the law of averages. And I'd certainly say that this is one of the better ones. It's a great story, some ingenious murders. There's a rush against time to catch the culprit. There's the mystery of how on earth a dead man can be doing all these murders. And great work with Grace and his team. And it's a really enjoyable read. I'd certainly say this is one of the better Roy Grace stories. So I'd certainly give it 7 out of 10. It's a very enjoyable read. So that's it for this week's brief book review. 10/10 till we do it again. Thanks for watching. Bye.